In this episode, I am talking with the environmental anthropologist, ethnobotanist, and binational indigenous studies scholar in Canada and the United States, Dr. Jessica Dolan. Please join me as I talk with Dr. Jessica Dolan about her expertise and lessons involving different facets of her work. Let's hear more from Dr. Jessica Dolan. I am here with Dr. Jessica Dolan. Give us a little bit of an introduction into who you are.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Dolan, and I'm an environmental anthropologist, an indigenous studies scholar, and I'm an ethnobotanist. And we are doing this interview in Brattleboro, Vermont, which is actually my hometown.
What does it mean to be an ethnobotanist exactly?
Ethnobotanists study the relationship between people and plants and culture. Sometimes people say we might study traditional medicinal systems or food systems. We might study environmental management systems. A lot of people work with indigenous or traditional communities to understand the genius of how they relate with the natural world, or oftentimes as well, remote communities or communities whose environmental knowledge has been marginalized or threatened in some sort of way.
Tell me about a project that taught you the biggest lesson. And it can be a project from your past, or it can be a project that you're currently involved with. And what was most surprising to you about that specific project?
Well, I'm going to have to talk about my current project, which to outside eyes might not seem like my current project because I don't always have time to work on it. And the lesson in it is it's something that I wanted to do for a while, but I didn't think that I could do. And while I was doing field research in Haudenosaunee communities, Haudenosaunee are Iroquois. A lot of people know them as the Iroquois. People who I was talking with about their environmental knowledge often recognized that I had a special connection with plants. So I always wanted to do a project that involved understanding their botanical knowledge systems. And in 2016, 2017, after I finished my PhD up at McGill University in Montreal, Canada, I started to communicate with some of my mentors in Mohawk communities, specifically Peggy Pike Thompson from Akwesasne, Henry Lickers, and some other folks about what would be an appropriate way to build an ethnobotanical project that is community-based. And it took me a couple of years to get this project funded. I ended up working with the University of Guelph and Plenty Canada, and the Greenbelt Foundation funded the project. And because I decided to work with an NGO and through a university, I made some compromises. So in other words, I had been thinking, I know exactly how I want to do this research, which would bring together archival research and community-based knowledge. And I know what I want to do, which is write a kind of field guide that would be useful for those folks in indigenous communities who are bringing back their languages and bringing back their botanical knowledge. But the organization, Plenty Canada, that we were working with, they really wanted to make a digital atlas as well. So part of the lesson of this for me is that because we were working as a team, I decided, all right, let's compromise because we're a team and we all have our goals. And we got the funding, we did the field research, we assembled a beautiful team of students and Mohawk linguists who are educators in the community. And Tim Johnson, who was the artistic director of the project, is an incredible leader in Mohawk research and museums and decolonizing and all kinds of things. He used to work for the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. So we had this stellar team. And we did really, really solid research and generated basically everything we'd need to create the atlas and the book. And we created the atlas by our deadline. And then for year 3, we were going to write the book. However, the project funding did not carry over into year 3. So we finished a beautiful atlas, which exists out there in the world, and you can look it up, GIBsurvey.ca, which stands for Greenbelt Indigenous Botanical Survey. And if you just Google that, you'll find it. Also, I met with a couple of editors, an editor from Canadian Scholars Press and an editor from the Five Colleges Press or UMass Press. I can't remember what it's technically formally called, but both meetings were so lovely and so encouraging. And then the funding ran out and other participants of the project moved on to do different things. And so I had to find a way to earn enough of a livelihood that I could then continue on in what I promised to do, which was write this book manuscript. And there's another piece to this, which is anthropology ethics or community-based work ethics, which is that if you are engaging and working as a team to try to restore indigenous knowledges, it's really best to follow through on what you commit to doing. So I was in a quandary because I needed to earn a living. I have a family, so I've got to, bring home the bacon. But I also really wanted to follow through, both for my own life's work and also my commitments with other people and with the communities. That gives you a bit of an example as to why, in my mind, this project is still on. Then what happened was that I proceeded to have different jobs, and for all different reasons, independently of my own performance, I guess we should call it, the jobs kept ending. Some of it has to do with what we like to call the federal transition and the current values and ethics of the current federal administration in the United States. That really affected the kinds of work that I do. So I had to keep investing all this time into getting jobs that would enable me to have time to write. This is a writer's quandary, I think, unless a person is independently wealthy. It's going to be almost 2 years later. I finally now have that position, and I have a plan to work on my manuscript dedicated, basically full time in the month of July. I'm going to go up and stay near my friends in Akwesasne Mohawk Nation and write for at least that whole month. And then that's going to jumpstart me back into having a regular day per week to write.
Up until this point, how many years has it been? So
this is an interesting thing because I don't think everyone has the same kind of stamina. And my friend Patricia Austin just said this to me the other day. She said, there's certain people in the world who have a stamina and a mind that holds multiple projects over periods of time. And I am one of those people. I consider a project on until it's finished.
You know what I call those? I tend to call myself a fire keeper, like you're tending to the fire, even if the embers are there and it looks like there are just a few embers on top of ash.
Love it.
There you are tending to that. Could you say that's probably also true of you?
Absolutely. I love that so much because we first started talking about this project, I'd say really seriously, in 2017. Before that, it was an idea that I had, and my mentor, Tim Johnson, independently of that, was beginning to talk with some of the Niagara Escarpment people. That's out in southern Ontario. They were interested in understanding Indigenous relationships with plants. So that was a seed. That's a pretty easy metaphor right there. But that was a seed that brought us together several years later to collaborate on this work.
What would you do differently? I know that you're still very much in the thick of it, but if you had to give a message to yourself as you were gearing up for this, what might you do differently?
I know exactly what I would do differently. When you look at the digital atlas or the online Greenbelt Indigenous Botanical Survey, you will see that it has a map component, a species component, locations. We had 3 plots at 23 field sites. That's the students did surveys in spring and the fall. So that's in 69 locations. They did that twice. So that's a huge amount of work. But then the same people who were researching the cultural research and the botanical research also built the website. So what I would do differently is I would build the team slightly differently so that there was a dedicated person whose job it was to organize the information and populate the website. We have a web designer. His name's David Beyer. He's a wonderful graphic designer. He made it look so beautiful. And we had an IT person who actually built the website, the nuts and bolts of, I don't know the vocabulary for this, but we needed a person to work with those 2 gentlemen to fill in the different information. And because I was doing that, and then my mentor's executive assistant, Amanda Harwood, and a graduate student named Mia Yuzao Ni, we were the 3 main people on that. That was time that we couldn't dedicate to writing. So that's what I would do differently, is have another person do that who's had an attention to detail and was really into it. And then we 3 could do the other parts of our job. There's only so many hours in the day, and writing generally takes us a long time.
So, wild card question that just came to me. It's 500 years into the future. You get to leave one message to plants, and then you get to also leave one message to whatever form humanity has taken. What is the one message that you are going to leave for each group?
Well, the thing about plants is, so not everyone believes that plants have personhood, but ever since I was a little girl, I always related with them like they are plant kindred or plant kin. And sometimes I look at some plants and I think they are the plantcestors, like the plant ancestors of future plant communities. The other thing that has been very moving about returning to live in my hometown is that some of the same trees that I grew up around are still here. And I have this feeling that they remember me. I can go to the pine tree that grows right outside my elementary school and sit under it, and it's the same white pine tree. And that can help bring me back in time. There's a certain sound that the wind makes when it goes through white pine needles that I can hear. And I look down and there's wild strawberries still growing on that hill, which are the plant descendants of the plantcestor strawberries that I ate when I was a little girl. So this question makes me think about plant communities and human communities, and how the plant communities in the future and the human communities in the future are hopefully our descendants. And I can't think of anything, super profound, except for I would say, we haven't forgotten you. We think about you all the time, and we want to make sure that you can live well here and thrive. And that's the reason for my work.
You can learn more about Dr. Jessica Dolan and her ongoing work by visiting the links provided in the show notes. And although this is the last episode of this micropod behind the project, I want to always encourage you to keep thinking about the lessons and stories that are connected to all of the things that are drawing your attention. What's the story behind your project?